At 9 o'clock on February 26, 1945, Private First Class Douglas Jacobson crouched behind a jagged spine of volcanic rock on the western slope of Hill 382, watching a Marine Bazooka team die in front of him. He was 19 years old, 3 island campaigns behind him. No medals, no rank beyond PFC, just another rifleman in Company I, 3rd Battalion, 23rd Marines, 4th Marine Division, pinned down on the most fortified ground north of Mount Suribachi. The Japanese 20mm anti-aircraft gun opened fire again. The bazooka gunner never had time to drop the launcher. The loader fell with the canvas rocket bag still slung across his chest. Both men lay motionless in the black ash. The steel tube rested where it fell, half buried, pointing uselessly toward the sky. Jacobson had enlisted at 17, lying about his age. Back home in Port Washington, New York, he drafted blueprints for his father and worked summers as a lifeguard on Long Island beaches. Now he was crouched on Iwo Jima, an 8-square-mile island of sulfur, shattered rock, and death. 5 days earlier, 30,000 Marines had come ashore expecting light resistance. The intelligence estimates had been catastrophically wrong. Lieutenant General Tadamaki Kurabayashi had spent 8 months turning Iwo Jima into a fortress. 18 kilometers of tunnels, concrete pillboxes, buried artillery, interlocking fields of fire. Hill 382, 125 feet of volcanic rock, anchored the entire northern defensive system. Marines called this sector the meat grinder. The name was literal. In 7 days of fighting, the 23rd Marines had lost nearly half their strength. Assault after assault on Hill 382 had ended the same way. Marines crossed open ground. Japanese gunners waited. Then everything opened at once. Tanks burned. Flamethrower teams died short of their targets. Squads disappeared into the ash without ever seeing who killed them. Now it was happening again. At the base of the hill, the 20mm gun swept the approach with surgical precision. Every burst dropped men. Company I had already lost 17 killed and 26 wounded in the first half hour. Without that gun destroyed, the attack would collapse. Jacobson watched another Marine try to reach the fallen bazooka. He made it 5 yards. A single shot cracked. The Marine fell forward and didn't move. The bazooka lay untouched. Jacobson understood what it meant. A bazooka was a 2-man weapon by doctrine and by design. One to aim and fire. One to load, connect the ignition wire, manage the backblast. Alone, it was dangerous, awkward, nearly impossible to reload under fire. But the 2 men were dead, and the gun was still firing. Another burst ripped across the slope. 3 more Marines went down. Higher command was watching this sector. Failure here meant failure across the 4th Marine Division front. Beyond Hill 382 lay the amphitheater, Turkey Knob, and the ruins of Minami Village, each one layered with enemy guns. Jacobson didn't wait for orders. He stood and ran. There was no cover. The ash swallowed his boots. Japanese riflemen tracked him immediately. The anti-aircraft gun slewed toward him. Rounds snapped past his head. Jacobson reached the bazooka, dropped to one knee, grabbed the steel tube. 13 pounds. He slung the dead loader's canvas bag over his shoulder, for rockets left. 11 pounds apiece. 67 pounds total. He ran again. The gun fired. The air screamed. He dove behind a shattered cluster of rocks 30 yards from the enemy position, chest heaving, uniform coated in sulfur dust. The launcher tube was already hot under his hands. He had never fired a bazooka alone. Training echoed in his head, steps meant for 2 men moving in sequence. Gunner sets position. Loader inserts rocket. Loader connects ignition wire. Tap helmet. Clear backblast. Fire. Jacobson had no loader. He laid the tube on the ground, pulled an M6A3 rocket from the bag. 19 inches long. Shaped charge warhead. Folding fins. He slid it into the rear of the launcher until it locked. Pulled the coiled ignition wire free. Wrapped it around the contact spring. The Japanese gun crew knew he was there now. They were adjusting. Jacobson lifted the launcher onto his shoulder. The weight dragged him sideways. He braced his left hand under the tube, right hand on the wooden grip. The ladder sight showed ranges out to 400 yards. He estimated 80. The rear of the tube was open. When he fired, a cone of superheated gas would erupt 15 meters behind him. Anyone there would be burned alive. There was no one behind him. He rose, sighted, squeezed the trigger. The electrical circuit closed. The rocket motor ignited inside the tube. Fire and smoke exploded from both ends. The blast hammered his ears. The rocket crossed the distance in a heartbeat. It struck the gun shield dead center. The shaped charge punched molten copper through steel at hypersonic speed. The warhead detonated. The gun and its four-man crew vanished in a single orange flash. Company I surged forward. Jacobson dropped flat, already reloading. He pulled the second rocket free, slid it into the tube, connected the wire, lifted the launcher again. Alone, under fire. 40 seconds. A trained team could do it in 12. That was enough time for the Japanese to react. Two machine gun positions higher on the slope opened up, cutting down 3 Marines in their first burst. The advance collapsed back into the ash. Jacobson saw the muzzle flashes. Earth-covered emplacements 70 yards uphill, invisible until they fired. He moved right, using broken rock for cover. The guns were focused on the main body of Marines, not him. At 40 yards, he saw the barrel traverse. Jacobson fired. The rocket penetrated the earth and timber before detonating. The emplacement disappeared. Dirt and debris cascaded down the slope. The second machine gun swung toward him. Jacobson was already moving. He dove into a shallow depression as bullets shredded the space he'd occupied. His ears rang from backblast. He had 2 rockets left. The gun was hunting him now. He crawled 20 yards left. The gun crew fired probing bursts. Jacobson waited. Listened. Counted. The firing stopped. Reload. He rose, shouldered the launcher. They saw him. Jacobson fired first. The rocket struck the mount. The explosion was smaller, but enough. The gun fell silent. 1 wounded Japanese soldier crawled from the wreckage before a Marine rifleman finished it. 3 positions destroyed. 13 remained. Jacobson lowered the launcher and looked uphill. Blocking the route to the summit stood a reinforced blockhouse. Concrete, volcanic stone, and steel, built to survive everything short of a direct hit. And he had 2 rockets left. Artillery hadn't broken it. The blockhouse sat 50 yards uphill, squat and immovable, its walls 3 feet thick, reinforced concrete faced with jagged volcanic rock. Naval gunfire had hammered it during the pre-invasion bombardment. 16-inch battleship shells. 8-inch cruiser rounds. The scars were visible, spalled concrete, blackened streaks, but the structure still stood. And inside it waited, alive. At least a dozen Japanese defenders with rifles and grenades. Jacobson had 1 rocket left. The M6A3-shaped charge could burn through armor, but concrete was different. It would punch a hole, yes, but whether that hole would be enough to kill the position outright was uncertain. 1 shot. No margin for error. He needed another way. The firing slit faced downslope, covering the main Marine avenue of approach, tied into the machine gun positions he had already destroyed. Jacobson began moving laterally across the slope, staying low, letting the volcanic ash coat his uniform until he blended into the terrain. The bazooka scraped softly against stone behind him. Company I remained pinned below, taking sporadic fire from higher positions on Hill 382. Jacobson crawled 40 yards through shattered rock and powder-fine ash. His sleeves were black. His mouth tasted like sulfur and dust. When he reached the northern face of the blockhouse, he froze. No firing slits. Instead, a rear entrance, barely 3 feet high, set into the hillside, framed with wood and partially concealed by the slope itself. A service opening, not meant to face an enemy. Voices drifted out. Japanese. 6 men at least. Jacobson set the bazooka down. Firing a rocket into that opening from 10 feet away would kill him outright. The backblast would rebound inside the confined space and tear him apart along with the defenders. He needed the rocket, but not like that. He pulled a fragmentation grenade from his belt. Then he picked up the launcher again and crept to within 15 feet of the entrance. He could hear the men inside clearly now, short commands, metal scraping, boots shifting on concrete. Jacobson shouldered the bazooka, aimed at the wooden frame, and fired. The rocket struck and detonated instantly. The blast shredded the frame and collapsed part of the rear wall. Smoke and pulverized concrete poured out of the opening. Jacobson dropped the launcher, yanked the grenade pin, counted 1, 2, and hurled it inside. The explosion came dull and heavy. Screams followed. Then nothing. He waited, rifle up. No movement. Jacobson circled to the firing slit and peered inside. The interior was wreckage, collapsed walls, broken timbers, bodies tangled in rubble. The position was finished. 4 down. 12 to go. But the bazooka was empty, useless without ammunition. Jacobson slung his rifle and started back downslope toward Company I. As he passed the bodies of the original bazooka team, he stopped. The loader's canvas bag lay beside them. He checked it. Empty. 200 yards away, near where Company I had begun the assault, he could see the supply point, ammunition crates, medical gear, and boxes of bazooka rockets stacked behind a low sandbag wall. Japanese observers watched it constantly. Mortar rounds fell there without warning. 3 Marines had already died trying to bring ammo forward. Jacobson went anyway. He moved low, using every fold in the ground, every rock cluster. A sniper round cracked past his head. Another smacked the ash 2 feet to his left. He didn't slow down. At the supply point, he ripped open a crate marked M6A3. 12 rockets inside, each sealed in cardboard. He grabbed 4, stuffed them into the dead loader's bag. A mortar detonated 30 yards away. He ran back uphill with the launcher in one hand and the rocket bag in the other. Company I was still pinned. Higher on Hill 382, another pillbox had opened fire, smaller than the blockhouse, but just as lethal. 5-man crew. Heavy machine gun. Perfect coverage of the eastern approach. Jacobson loaded a fresh rocket. 90 yards uphill. He advanced behind a cluster of rocks. The defenders had seen the blockhouse disappear. They knew exactly what was coming. They opened fire early. Too early. The first burst kicked up ash 10 feet to his right. Nervous fire. Shaken defenders made mistakes. Jacobson zigzagged uphill, moving between bursts. 15 yards. Then 20. Each pause in fire gave him 3 seconds. The gun went silent, reloading. He dove into a shallow depression and shouldered the launcher. 65 yards now. The pillbox was half buried in volcanic rock, its firing slit narrow by design. Narrow slits meant limited traverse. Jacobson moved right. The barrel tracked him. He kept moving. The barrel hit its limit. The gun stopped firing. The crew was repositioning inside. Jacobson stopped. Aimed. Fired. The rocket crossed the distance in under a second, slipped through the firing slit, and detonated inside. The shaped charge turned the confined space into an oven of pressure and fire. Smoke and flame blasted out of every opening. Silence. Jacobson waited, then advanced. At 20 yards he could see the interior. 5 bodies, shattered equipment, spent brass carpeting the floor. 5 down. 11 to go. Below him, Marines were moving again, advancing in small groups, using the destroyed positions as cover. Progress, slow, costly, but real. Ahead, the terrain grew worse. Hill 382's western face was a maze of jagged formations and interlocked defenses. Months of preparation. Every approach covered. Every path a funnel into a kill zone. Jacobson climbed. 50 yards ahead, he spotted an earth-covered rifle emplacement. Just a hole with log overhead cover and volcanic rock piled on top. 2 riflemen inside firing downslope. Artillery had passed over it harmlessly. Direct fire couldn't touch it. Jacobson flanked left, climbed slightly above the position, loaded a rocket, and fired downward. The rocket punched through the cover and detonated inside. The emplacement collapsed. 6 down. 10 to go. Ahead, guarding the summit approach, lay the final barrier. 6 interconnected positions arranged in a semicircle. Rifle pits, machine guns, mortars, all supporting each other. The last killing ground. 2 previous Marine assaults had died there. Jacobson checked his bag. 3 rockets. 6 positions. The arithmetic was merciless. He would run out of ammunition before the hill ran out of defenders. He needed more rockets. The supply point lay 300 yards behind him, downslope, fully exposed to Japanese observation from the summit. Mortar crews had already zeroed the obvious routes. Snipers watched the open ground, and the defenders in the remaining position cluster had almost certainly seen him by now. If he went back, they would be waiting. Jacobson went anyway. He moved downhill through shallow depressions, avoiding ridgelines, keeping his silhouette low. A mortar round slammed into the slope 50 yards to his left. Another followed, closer. The Japanese were bracketing him. The math was simple. One more adjustment, and the next round would land on him. He sprinted the last 100 yards. At the supply point, he ripped open another crate, grabbed 4 rockets, and slung the canvas bag over his shoulder. A mortar detonated 20 yards away. Shrapnel screamed overhead. He flattened instinctively, then surged to his feet and ran uphill again. 67 pounds of steel and explosives dragging at his arms while mortars walked across the slope trying to kill him. By 10:30 a.m., Jacobson reached the 6-position defensive cluster. 90 minutes of continuous combat. Sweat soaked his uniform despite the cool February air. His ears rang from repeated backblasts. His shoulder burned where the launcher had slammed into bone again and again. For rockets. 6 positions. He studied the layout. The Japanese defenses formed a shallow arc roughly 60 yards across, each position supporting the others. 15 to 20 yards between emplacements. Close enough for overlapping fire, far enough that one rocket could not destroy more than one target. If he attacked the left flank, the others would rake him from the side. If he went straight in, all 6 could engage him at once. He broke the arc down in his mind. Rightmost, a rifle pit, 2 men. Next, a machine gun nest tucked behind volcanic rock. Third and fourth, mortar pits. Fifth, another rifle pit. Sixth, a reinforced observation post overlooking the entire western slope. That was the key. Without spotters, the rest would be fighting blind. Jacobson moved wide right, circling outside the defensive perimeter. The ground was broken and sharp, volcanic rock tearing at his sleeves and knees. The Japanese were focused downslope, watching the Marine advance. No one expected an attack from the flank, from inside their own defenses. At 70 yards, he stopped, loaded, shouldered the bazooka, fired. The rocket slammed into the observation post's reinforced wall and detonated, collapsing one side of the structure. Jacobson reloaded instantly and fired again into the smoking ruin. The post disintegrated. 2 Japanese soldiers stumbled out, wounded and dazed. Advancing Marines shot them before they could take cover. Jacobson was already moving. The nearest rifle pit lay 40 yards away. 2 Japanese soldiers inside, Arisaka rifles ready. They had seen the observation post vanish and were scanning frantically for the threat. One spotted him. Jacobson dove as a shot cracked past his head. 2 rockets left. 5 positions remaining. He couldn't waste a rocket on 2 men. He pulled a fragmentation grenade, counted 1, 2, 3, and rose just long enough to throw. The grenade dropped neatly into the pit. The explosion killed both defenders. Now everything opened up. The remaining 4 positions erupted with fire. Machine gun rounds shredded the air. Mortar crews began adjusting. Jacobson heard the unmistakable thump of rounds leaving tubes. 10 seconds, maybe less. He ran left, away from his last position. Mortars slammed into the spot he'd just vacated, shards of rock winding past him. He slid behind a low volcanic ridge and pressed himself flat. The machine gun nest tracked him, short, controlled bursts. A disciplined gunner. He couldn't move without drawing fire. Jacobson loaded another rocket. The nest sat 50 yards away, dug into a natural depression. Excellent cover, perfect field of fire. He waited. The gun fired a 5-round burst. Pause. Jacobson rose, aimed, fired. The rocket struck the edge of the depression and detonated. Smoke and debris erupted. The gun fell silent. He didn't wait to confirm. A Japanese soldier burst from the smoke, running toward the next rifle pit. Jacobson dropped him with 2 rounds from his M1. 2 rockets left. 3 positions remaining. The mortar pits came first. He moved uphill, angling toward the nearest, 60 yards away. The crew was reloading, unaware. He shouldered the launcher and fired. The rocket hit dead center. The explosion hurled the mortar tube into the air, spinning end over end before crashing down 30 yards away. 1 rocket left. 2 positions remaining. The last mortar pit sat 40 yards uphill. Between them, a rifle pit, 3 soldiers. 5 men. 1 rocket. Jacobson didn't hesitate. He aimed at the mortar pit and fired his final round. The rocket struck and detonated. Both crewmen died instantly. The tube flipped backward, base plate torn free. The rifle pit remained. Jacobson dropped the empty launcher, unslung his M1 Garand. 8 rounds. 3 targets. At 40 yards, he fired. 1 soldier collapsed. Fired again. The second fell backward into the pit. The third tried to climb out and run. Jacobson shot him in the back. The 6-position cluster was gone. 13 enemy positions destroyed since 0900. The route to the summit of Hill 382 lay open. Company I began advancing through the shattered defenses, Marines moving cautiously, expecting resistance that never came. The positions Jacobson had destroyed were the anchors. Without them, the remaining defenders were isolated. Jacobson looked left. Across a shallow ravine, another Marine company was pinned down, crouched behind rocks, unable to move. Heavy fire poured down on them from a position he couldn't see from his angle. A pillbox, concrete and volcanic rock overlooking the eastern approach, its firing slit commanding the ravine like a guillotine. Jacobson picked up the empty bazooka tube and started downhill again. His legs ached. His shoulder throbbed. He had been fighting nearly 2 hours without water. The supply point had moved forward. He found it behind a cluster of rocks 70 yards downhill. More rockets. He loaded 4 into the canvas bag and turned toward the ravine. Sniper fire cracked past him as he crossed open ground. He reached the pinned-down company. A Marine captain saw him, saw the bazooka, and pointed uphill. Jacobson nodded. He had already chosen his next target. The pillbox sat 80 yards away, perched 15 feet above the ravine floor like a concrete predator. From that height, its defenders commanded every approach. The structure showed no visible damage from the naval bombardment. Battleship shells had scorched the exterior, chipped concrete, scarred the rock, but the firing slit remained intact, perfectly positioned to rake the ravine below. Inside, the gun crew worked with discipline. A Type 92 heavy machine gun hammered methodical bursts downslope, 7mm rounds, 600 per minute, lethal out past 800 meters. At this range, it was devastating. Marines below were pinned flat, unable to move without drawing fire. Jacobson did not approach from below. He edged right, climbing along the ravine's wall, keeping his body tight to the broken volcanic rock. The gun crew was focused entirely on the Marines trapped beneath them. They never looked down. Using dead ground the gun could not depress into. Jacobson climbed higher, step by careful step, exploiting the blind angle beneath the pillbox. He moved where the machine gun physically could not aim. He reached a firing position 50 yards from the pillbox, slightly below its level. The angle was bad. Firing uphill reduced accuracy. The rocket would lose velocity. The margin for error was thin, but the firing slit was visible, 3 feet wide, 18 inches high. If he could put a shaped charge round through that opening, it would detonate inside the concrete chamber. Jacobson loaded a rocket, shouldered the launcher, adjusted for elevation, and fired. The rocket climbed, too high. It struck the concrete wall 2 feet above the slit and detonated. Shards of reinforced concrete exploded outward, raining down the slope. Smoke and dust billowed, but the pillbox held. The machine gun resumed firing immediately. Jacobson reloaded. He lowered his aim by inches, controlled his breathing, fired again. This time, the rocket punched cleanly through the firing slit. The detonation erupted inside the structure. Fire blasted from every opening. Smoke poured outward. The machine gun went silent. The pillbox was dead. 14 enemy positions destroyed. 2 remained. Below him, Marines rose from cover. The sudden silence triggered movement. Within minutes, they crossed the ravine and began climbing toward the summit, exploiting the opening Jacobson had created. Then he heard it. Not gunfire. Something heavier. A grinding mechanical growl, metal tracks biting into volcanic ash. A Japanese tank was moving. From the eastern base of Hill 382, a Type 95 Hago light tank crawled uphill at 8 kilometers per hour. 7 tons of steel. Diesel engine. A 37mm main gun. 2 Type 97 machine guns. 3-man crew. The Japanese had been using these tanks as mobile pillboxes, hiding them in crevices and depressions where naval gunfire could not reach. This one was advancing deliberately, turrets sweeping left and right as it searched for targets. The tank commander had seen the Marines moving. He was maneuvering to intercept. Jacobson watched from 70 yards away as the tank worked its way up a shallow draw leading toward the summit. Behind it, the Marine company he had just freed advanced in the open, completely unaware of the threat. The tank stopped. The turret rotated. The 37mm gun elevated toward the Marines. Jacobson loaded a rocket. The Type 95's armor was thin, 14mm on the front, 12 on the sides, 6 on the top. The M6A3 shaped charge could punch through nearly 100mm of steel. From any angle, The tank was vulnerable. But tanks were still dangerous. If he missed, the Hago would turn its guns on him. The commander was visible through the open hatch, scanning for targets. Jacobson fired. The rocket slammed into the turret's left side and detonated. The shaped charge burned through the thin armor and exploded inside. Smoke burst from the hatch. The turret jammed mid-rotation. The engine kept running, but the main gun was dead. The tank was damaged, not destroyed. One of the machine guns opened fire, spraying the slope. Marines dove for cover. Jacobson reloaded. The tank began reversing, backing down the draw, trying to escape. The driver couldn't see Jacobson. The jammed turret blocked his view uphill. Jacobson moved left, circling. He reached a firing position 60 yards behind the tank, lining up on the rear deck. The engine compartment, the thinnest armor. 6 millimeters. He fired. The rocket penetrated the engine deck and detonated instantly. Diesel fuel ignited. Flames erupted upward, feeding into the turret through the shattered armor. 2 crewmen bailed out, uniforms burning. Marine riflemen cut them down. The tank burned, black smoke clawing into the morning sky. 15 positions destroyed. 1 remained. Jacobson had 1 rocket left. He looked uphill. At the summit stood the final strongpoint, a massive blockhouse larger than all the others. Thick concrete walls, multiple firing slits. It dominated the approach. If it stood, Hill 382 would not fall. Jacobson started climbing. The slope was steep. Volcanic ash slid under his boots. His legs burned. His shoulders throbbed. 2 hours of continuous combat. 67 pounds of weapons and ammunition. No water. No rest. Behind him, Company I and Marines from the 24th had linked up. Nearly 80 men now advanced together. Enough to take the summit if the blockhouse could be neutralized. Jacobson reached a position 40 yards out. Through the firing slits, he could see movement. 6 Japanese soldiers at least. Rifles. Grenades. They knew he was there. The structure had been built to survive battleship fire. 4-foot-thick reinforced concrete mixed with volcanic rock. Earth and stone layered over the roof. A 16-inch naval shell had failed to destroy it. Jacobson had 1 rocket. The firing slits were too narrow, too risky. A miss would mean death. So he moved again. He circled right, exposed, rifle fire snapping past his head. He dove behind rocks and spotted the rear entrance. A reinforced door with a steel frame and wooden panels, facing away from the American advance. The defenders had never expected an attack from here. Jacobson loaded his final rocket. He aimed at the door. Fired. The rocket hit the steel frame and detonated. The door blew inward. Concrete and timber collapsed. Smoke and dust poured out. Jacobson dropped the bazooka. He drew his M1 Garand. Pulled 2 grenades. Charged. The first grenade vanished into the smoke. The explosion echoed inside. The second followed. Then Jacobson entered. The interior was chaos, smoke, rubble, wounded men screaming. He fired methodically, clearing the space room by room. At arm's length. In the dark. His rifle ran dry. He drew his pistol and kept moving. 2 minutes later, the blockhouse was silent. 16 enemy positions destroyed. 75 Japanese defenders killed. 30 minutes of continuous combat from 0900 to 0930. Then another 90 minutes clearing what remained of Hill 382. The summit was finally open. Private First Class Douglas Jacobson was 19 years old when the Japanese defensive line on Hill 382 finally broke. Behind him, Company I surged forward. Marines climbed through the gaps he had carved into the hillside, stepping past shattered pillboxes and smoking craters. By late morning, they reached the summit. At noon, the American flag flew over the high ground. By 1300 hours, Marines were already pushing down the reverse slope, hunting remaining defenders through tunnels, crevices, and collapsed fighting positions. Hill 382, anchor point of the entire Japanese defensive system on Iwo Jima, was gone. The cost had been brutal. Company I alone had lost 43 men killed or wounded. Across the regiment, the 23rd Marines had taken nearly 50% casualties since landing on February 19th. But the hill was American ground now, and the Japanese defense in this sector had been fatally ruptured. At 1,400 hours, Jacobson walked down the slope. His uniform was torn to shreds. His face was blackened with volcanic ash and burned powder. He carried the empty bazooka tube in one hand. its steel scarred and blistered from repeated firings. A Navy corpsman stopped him, checked for wounds, cuts, bruises, severe dehydration. Nothing that required evacuation. Someone asked him how he had done it. Jacobson shrugged. He said he didn't know. He had only been thinking about one thing: getting off that hill alive. The battle for Iwo Jima dragged on for 3 more weeks. The island was not officially secured until March 16th. By then, 6,821 Marines were dead. More than 17,000 were wounded. Of the 21,000 Japanese defenders, only 216 surrendered alive. 27 Marines and sailors earned the Medal of Honor on Iwo Jima, more than any other single battle in American history. Douglas Jacobson was promoted to corporal in April 1945. He returned to the United States that September and reported to Marine Corps headquarters in Washington. On October 5, 1945, standing in the White House, he received the Medal of Honor from President Harry Truman. Another recipient stood beside him that day, Jacqueline Lucas, the youngest Medal of Honor recipient of the battle. Jacobson was discharged in December. 4 months later, he re-enlisted. He attended officer candidate school at Quantico. In March 1954, he was commissioned as second lieutenant. He served again overseas: Japan, Okinawa, China, Vietnam. Quietly, professionally, without fanfare. Near the end of his career, a commanding officer discovered something unusual. Jacobson was the only officer in the Marine Corps without a high school diploma. So he took the GED exam. He passed. In 1967, diploma in hand, he retired as a major after 24 years of service. He moved to New Jersey, worked as a real estate agent, married a teacher he had met years earlier in Okinawa. In 1987, they moved to Florida. Jacobson almost never spoke about the war unless someone asked. Douglas Jacobson died on August 20, 2000, in Port Charlotte, Florida. He was 74 years old. Congestive heart failure. Pneumonia. He is buried at Arlington National Cemetery. Today, the Douglas T. Jacobson State Veterans Nursing Home stands in Port Charlotte, caring for veterans who followed the same path he once walked. 16 positions. 75 enemy soldiers. 30 minutes. 1 Marine. 1 bazooka meant for 2 men. Hill 382 fell because Douglas Jacobson refused to stop. If this story stayed with you, help us keep it alive. Every like tells YouTube this history matters. Every subscription helps rescue another forgotten story from the archives. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from, across the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, or beyond. If someone in your family served, tell us. You are not just watching history. You are preserving it.